during the Arizona 2020 election. You were very heavily involved in that. Comments that you made in my program ended up being covered by the news. I want to, before we get into the issues today, because your work has been incredible and courageous, and you don't you don't suffer fools. You just go for it. It's amazing, and you've been dealing with some of the same crap we're all dealing with, but yet you've continued to be out there forging forward. You're a great patriot. You're very committed, and we need people like you out there for sure. So before we go into the issues of today, can you give me any update on the Arizona situation, both 2020 and also the 2022 stolen election from Kerry Lake and the others?
Yeah, I mean, we saw exactly what happened in 2022, and when you don't fix the problems that you had in 2020, you can't expect different results for that part for
Right.
2022. This was clearly an attempt to steal an election, and so far it has been successful once again. What you have to understand here is that the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors are all corrupt, every single one of them. You had so many conflicts of interest, it wasn't even funny. Article 2, Section 1 of the Arizona Constitution says that all elections should have free and equal access. So, right then and there is the problem because this was not free and equal access. When over 60% of machines are down on election day, that is not free and equal access. Not to mention, as Secretary of State, she was supposed to recuse herself according to the Arizona Constitution. She wasn't even supposed to be part of the entire process, which of course then she was. Then you have the Stephen Richer and Bill Gates pack that they formed. Imagine that. You are in charge of elections at the county recorder's office and the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, but yet the two of you behind the scenes have a secret pack in which you are raising money, searching for, organizing, recruiting candidates that will go against the candidates that are America First candidates. And yet somehow that's supposed to be okay? Or what about the fact that the BOD printers purposely used the wrong size paper and then they were
Hmm.
recalibrated before the election? So in other words, they were made to default and have problems and malfunction and all of those things. I mean,
Right, right.
there's so many. I could go
There's
on
the
and
corrupt
on and
printing,
on.
yeah, the corrupt printing company that was getting payoffs from left-wing sources and giving money to the left-wing candidates. You had several people in Arizona who were involved with the election literally flee the state. They disappeared. They
Yep.
moved out. I mean, as bad as the 2020 stolen election was, and they got an assist from Fox News, Adam Mitchlick, who declared Arizona a Biden state before we even had the results. The 2022 situation against Kerry Lake and the whole slate of candidates, Hamadeh and the rest of them, was so openly, blatantly stolen. It was so infuriating to the country. Everybody was watching this. And yet they
Kerry
just
Lake
did it
won.
again. And
Kerry Lake won Arizona by at
a
least
massive victory.
450 to 500,000 votes to as many as over a million, and that's a fact. Okay, it wasn't
Oh,
even
yes.
close. They changed
No, no,
zip
no
codes
question.
when they were mailing out the mailers so they would get lost. They did so many horrific things in Arizona, and here's the reason why. The reason why is because people like me and many others were telling people to vote on election day. Don't vote early. The earlier you vote, the more likely your vote won't count. So we were telling people vote on election day. So we bombarded the election polling stations on election day. So now they
Mm.
had a situation where they need to go to a plan B because we weren't coming in early. We were coming in on election day. So they decided at that point, fine, if you think you're going to win this election, nope, we're going to sabotage the voting machines and shut down your ability to be able to vote in a free and fair election. And that is why America right now in 2023 is number 39 on the Freedom Index list, which is absolutely appalling.
And now we have groups like Turning Point USA, and there's some financial people involved in saying that, look, if they're going to play ball that way, we have to play ball that way next time. We have to, they're going to vote for 3 weeks until they get the result they want. We're only going to vote for 6 hours. We're going to have to do this too. We're going to have to start voting weeks early and keep voting right up till that we get what we want. We're going to have to start learning how to do the voter harvesting, going to the nursing homes and signing people up, even though they might have passed away, and all of the other stuff. We're going to have to learn how to stuff the drop boxes. I mean, Dinesh D'Souza had 2,000 mules. We're going to have 10,000 mules. We're
Yeah,
going to have to do
exactly.
their deal. And it's just how I mean, that's how it's done. That's how it's done. We have to face the facts. It's untasteful. We don't like it. It's dishonest. I'm not saying that anyone should break the law. There's ways to shade the law, which is what the Democrats do. But we have to get our hands dirty and do this, or else we're just going to lose the whole republic.
Exactly. And let me touch base on one thing. You can use this one as the title of the video if you want.
Yeah.
Elections are stolen by the Democrats immediately after the last election that they stole. But then what happens is about 6 months before the next election is when they really start to ramp up the fraud game. And the actual fraud that takes place that steals the election is 45 to 60 days before election day. And so now that we know that, because we've seen this through patterns and everything else, we have to be willing, able, and ready to get as many boots on the ground, watching drop boxes all around the country. We need to be watching polling stations all around the country on election week, I should say, if not 2 weeks. We need to have teams of people in each state, and those teams will go and they'll vote early, and then they will do watches. They will stay up all night from 11 to 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, and they'll do it in shifts to make sure that there's no trucks coming in, to make sure there's no cars dropping off ballots. These are types of things we need to do. And of course, I agree with President Trump. I agree with Ron DeSantis. I agree with most of the Republican candidates. We need to ballot harvest the crap out of the 2024 election. I want to see ballots showing up at bars. I want to see ballots showing up at poker games. I want to see ballots showing up at pool halls. I want to see ballots at church. I want to see ballots at school. I want to see ballots everywhere, because you're right. The left never plays fair. And if one party, the Republicans, are playing fair, and the other party, the Democrats, are not playing fair, how is the party that's playing fair going to win the election? They're not going to be able to. And I say this, it is the most biggest existential threat, the right to free and fair elections being taken from us, because that has allowed the Bolshevik revolution that took place in 2020.
Yeah.
What's that?
The deep state is tampering here, so we have to kind of roll with that. We have to do all sorts of things that we found distasteful. The last election had the largest mail order junk mail in history. Millions of ballots mailed out. We have to mail out millions of ballots. People have to get 2, 3, 4 ballots. Look, I got that many in the last election from Democrats. So they're doing this, and it's the way it has to be done. There was some efforts made in Arizona, I thought, last time, with Cleta Mitchell and a few other people putting some boots on the ground. There was this guy who was going around the different precincts in Maricopa County and keeping a record of things, and he discovered all kinds of fraud. This is a legitimate lawyer who did this. Nothing was done. The court system, of course, ignores it because either they're corrupt outright, and I'm not saying that, but I think it has more to do with the fact that they have they have a tradition of not wanting to get involved.
I think the
in
judges
politics.
in Maricopa County in Arizona are run and owned and operated by the drug cartels. I really do think that. Not to mention that, but the bar association, not just in Arizona, but the DC Bar Association and the 65 group, if you ever heard of them, these are radical, extreme leftists that go after, censor, and try to get disbarred conservative leaning, prosecutors and judges and things like that. They're going after Trump's lawyers. They've done that in
Yeah,
the
that's why
past. They're
Trump said
going
get a
after
lawyer.
Kerry Lake's lawyers. They've done that in the
Hmm.
past. Brutal.
And that's, I mean, I
Absolutely
think
brutal.
that that's backfiring on them, in my opinion, because that's why you don't hear Lester Holt and big news even talking about this, about what happened with the Trump indictment, because it's so obviously political. It's like we're a third world country where they arrest the opposition and put them in jail. I mean, several people from one guy from Africa, one guy from South America that I know said this reminds them of what goes on in their countries. The opposite, they put the opposition in jail. They get some phony charge and they get some corrupt judge to get involved, and they issue a phony indictment. And I think that the American people are starting to get this. I think people are uncomfortable, except maybe the hardcore Trump haters who don't care. But I don't think there's enough of them. I think your
Hmm.
average independent, your middle of the road people who might not have liked Trump, maybe still don't like him, but they're uncomfortable about what's happened here. This is so un-American and so ugly that I just
Yeah.
think that they might have jumped the shark on it.
I think if you look at the 2016 election, let's go back in history. The
Yeah.
2016 election had about 6% of the vote that went to third party or independent candidates. Okay. You had Gary Johnson, you had
Mhm.
Jill Stein, you had a few others. So they took up 6%. So when the numbers came in and they thought Hillary, or Kankles McPantsuit, as I like to call her on my show, when they thought that Kankles McPantsuit was going to win, they didn't attest for the independent vote. And therefore, with Jill Stein taking votes away and Gary Johnson taking votes away, Trump was able to squeak out 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 victories in the important states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Mhm.
So they had no choice to get it to him. In the 2020 election, there was around 2% of the independent vote or independent candidates, okay? Not independent votes, but independent candidates to vote for. What we have to do in 2024 is we need to make sure that the independent candidate number gets more than 7.5 to 8%, because that 7.5 to 8% will not only compensate for the at least 7, 8%, excuse me, of fraud that we can expect. That's number one. But number two, we can then have more chances for Trump, if not Trump, DeSantis, whoever it may be. Hopefully, it's, of course, Trump, right? Regardless of where he's running from. And so, if
Mhm.
we have a situation in which we have Joe Manchin running as an independent, if we have other people like that weirdo with the frizzy hair on MSNBC is running for something called the doofus party or whatever the hell it is. I don't know what it is. But
Right.
regardless, we need to get that independent candidate number up to 8%, 9%, because then what will happen is Trump will have a much better way and an easier way of winning. The other thing we
Yeah.
have to do in the primaries, and this is people, you need to listen to this. We need to figure out a way to sabotage in open primary states. In particular, if you live in one of those, look for it, find out if you do. We need to make sure that RFK Jr., who's, by the way, is no conservative, is the
No
one
way.
that
You've heard him.
wins the nomination. Because
Mhm.
if Biden or Gruesome Newsom is put on the ticket or whoever, we want to make sure that Robert Kennedy Jr. wins the nomination, because then they're knocked out. The left hates him a lot, so they're going to do whatever they can to go against him, leaving a much bigger and easier and better path for President Trump to be victorious, especially if Joe Manchin runs as an independent. So I think the best scenario would be an RFK Jr. Nominee for the Democrats, an independent run of Joe Manchin that takes up, 7, 8%, whatever it may be, and then Trump cleans the floor with both of them. That's what we have to do. And
That's a
folks,
great
you need to
scenario.
vote for RFK Jr. in your state. You need to unregister as a Republican and then register as a Democrat. Vote for RFK Jr. Let's sabotage. Let's do what Rush Limbaugh used to always talk about doing. Let's sabotage their ability to continue to hold their grip of power.
It's a great strategy. We need a strong independent. We need a straw candidate, frankly, a guy who is maybe a former governor, somebody who has some gravitas running as an independent, like Johnson or like Bill Weld had. And I don't know if that's coming down the pike, but it's a great strategy. Josh, you just wrote an article that I think is pretty stunning on your Substack regarding the vaccine. Talk about that
Yes.
a bit.
Yeah, well, I sat down with Dr. Naomi Wolf for the second time yesterday, and
Okay.
she is amazing. What a patriot!
Yeah.
What an investigative journalist she is, and she is working on what is known as the Pfizer documents. And the Pfizer documents were the ones where the judge, well, they asked a judge, I should say, yeah, don't release that information for the next 50 years. So all these people that we've killed are already
Sure.
dead and buried, and so there's nothing that can be done, and we won't be held accountable. The judge said, I don't think so. In the best interest of public safety and knowledge, and and being upfront with the people, we're not going to do that. And so the judge ruled against that, and now they're being forced in the next year or two to start releasing all of these documents. Well, they have taken it upon themselves, along with the War Room, and they are working behind the scenes to go through all of these documents. And the things that we're finding, and what I talked about with her on jbushow.com, which is where you can go to see the interview, was the fact that this was not only a bioweapon, but it was a bioweapon designed specifically to target women and their reproductive abilities.
Oh
And,
my God.
we go through all these documents. 72% of all adverse conditions were against women. 16% of those 72% were against reproductive, abilities and things like that. Putting, antifreeze in the shots. I mean, it just horrific and horrible
It's
things.
evil. Yeah, it's
And so
despicable.
we go through this whole entire interview, and she just lays out what they did. And there's no question, none whatsoever, this was a bioweapon.
Oh yeah, no, quite clearly, and it's an ugly situation when you can have these big pharma companies making a fortune on the backs primarily of women and basically an increase in diseases across the board. It's not a coincidence that there's been an uptick in cancers and heart disease. You should have on Ed Dowd, by the way, good guy. He does some
Mm.
research using insurance actuarial data, which is looking at,
Yes.
risk and looking at disease. And they've seen an unprecedented uptick in the past 18 months. Unlike any, the standard deviation has moved over 10 times. It's never happened before of all sorts of harm and disease and death. And it's, they think it is the vaccine. That's the only thing that's changed in the last 18
Right.
months. And it just,
Mhm.
it's very stunning research. Anyway, Josh, let my listeners and viewers know where they can catch your show and any other information you'd like to share.
Sure, no problem. You can go to jbushow.com, as you see behind me. That is the website. I'm one of the most censored conservative voices in all of America. I used to be on Amazon Prime, Roku Television, millions and millions and millions of views. And of course, before the 2020 election, they completely shut me down because I was exposing the voter fraud that was going to be taking place 2 weeks later. And so you can go to joshbernsteinuncensored.com, jbushow.com. It'll bring you to the same place. I usually shorten it up to jbushow.com so people don't miss it. Please become a subscriber. I'm not joking when I say this. I am certainly one of the top 5 most censored voices in America. We've got a lot of security on the website, a lot of costs. But we also cover the things that even some of the conservative media doesn't cover. And if they do cover it, they never go into the depth and detail that I will cover different stories. So my motto is the truth has no agenda, and neither do I. And if it's banned on social media, you'll find it there at jbushow.com.
All right, Josh, listen, thanks so much for joining me. We should do it regularly. And
We should. We should do it at least once a month, buddy.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
I
We
will
will.
absolutely commit to that. So
Thank you.
you
Good.
you
All
reach
right.
out to me and we'll do it.
Excellent, Josh. Listen, thanks a lot. And I'll talk to you soon.
God bless.
Same here.